It goes like this. It is E3 2018. I watched the trailer to Ghost of Tsushima. I like it and want to play it. And then in 2019, the game gets released and I start playing the game. But wait, you might say, Ghost of Tsushima got released in 2020, not in 2019. Yes, but at the time I didn't know that. And you may know where I'm going with it. Yes, I confused Sekiro with Ghost of Tsushima. If you wondered if there were people that confuse those two Japanese-themed games, yes, we exist. And let me just say, Sekiro violated me. Now, don't get me wrong, at the time I have already played Dark Souls 3. I beat the game, I beat the Nameless King, and I liked the game. It is not like I was a complete newbie. I realized that I'm not playing Ghost of Tsushima really quick, but Sekiro violated me anyway. And I think it is precisely because I have played Dark Souls 3. Because of how different Dark Souls 3 and actually any other Souls game is from Sekiro. I have made a great video on From Software formula, where I explain the genius of From Software game design formula. So if you are interested, the link to the video will be in the comment section. So the reason why I, and frankly a lot of gamers got violated by Sekiro, is because we were trained by Dark Souls games. We were trained to basically only dodge with one button and get invincibility frames. And the most important thing, in Dark Souls games we get to choose weapons, armor, and we get to level up our character the way to match our playstyle. In Sekiro there is none of that. It is you who have to match the playstyle of the game, not the other way around. Me being trained by Dark Souls, I was stuck in that mindset. I usually, just like in Dark Souls 3, were trying to solve all the issues with the dodge button, and I suffered because of it. In the end, I got to the final boss of the game, and I never passed the first phase of Ishin, which is the second phase of the boss out of 4. I was dying so damn quick that I didn't have the time to learn the patterns of the boss. Or so I thought. In the end, I accepted the defeat from Ishin and dropped the game. Actually, I think it is kinda impressive to get to the last boss of Sekiro, basically ignoring all the mechanics of the game. But I digress. So we come to the present days. I have played Lies of P and I extremely like the game. I beat it and I'm happy in the game at every chance that I have. Actually, it is pretty similar to Sekiro actually. Later I have played base Elden Ring. I beat the game, but I was using the Mimic. Then the DLC came out and everyone was talking about how it is extremely hard. A lot of people in fact were actually complaining. People were saying that the final boss of the DLC is the hardest boss that From Software created. And I took it as a challenge. I thought that if I will beat the DLC without Mimic and summons, I could rest easy knowing that there is nothing I can't beat. And in the end, I achieved my goal and beat the whole DLC without summons. And I did it before Radahn got nerfed. But the absolution didn't come, and the defeat from Ishin still kept me up at night. That was an exaggeration. So finally I've made up my mind and decided to revisit Sekiro after 6 years. So, how is the game after 6 years? Actually, it is great. It is one of the best games that I've ever played. To be honest, when Sekiro won the Game of the Year in 2019, I thought that the award is more for the general contribution in the gaming industry, rather than for the actual game that is Sekiro. And I was wrong. The game is not perfect. It has some issues that I will mention later, but overall it gives a very unique experience. An experience that I didn't receive from any other game, not from other From Software games, nor from Lies of P. Even though I said that the games are pretty similar. Now, usually my videos are more about analysis, but this one is a semi-review, semi-guide, semi-personal story. But if you are interested, I make videos on a broad variety of video game topics, such as the Elder Scrolls 6 predictions, objective about Cryptic, or the video that I have already mentioned about From Software game design formula. So check them out later and subscribe to the channel. Now, over the years I have seen multiple clips of Sekiro gameplay, and I have realized what I was doing wrong. And shortly after I beat the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, I have made up my mind to go back to have my retribution. So basically what I was doing wrong was that I hesitated.
Hesitation is defeat.
Yes, that phrase I've heard countless times on my first playthrough. If only I would have listened to that phrase. I was hearing that phrase, but I wasn't listening. Instead of accepting the rules of the game, I was arguing with them. I was not fighting bosses, but the game itself. Basically, Sekiro requires the gamer to play the game in one specific way, and your success depends on how well you can execute that specific way. That's what is so different about Sekiro in comparison to other From Software games. In other Souls games, you are able to create, change, and adapt your build, both to your preferable playstyle and to bosses that you encounter. So it is basically no playstyle is wrong if you make it work. In Sekiro though, there is only one correct playstyle, the aggressive playstyle. The game has a unique mechanic of stances. That is, if you break enemy's stance, you can perform a death blow, which ends ordinary NPCs in one blow or ends one phase of the boss. To damage one's stance, you have to A. Deal damage, B. Strike enemy's block, and C. Parry enemy's attacks. The less HP one has, the faster the stance will break. Naturally, your stance breaks faster than the bosses, so you can't win just by parrying. Ideally, you have to deal damage so the enemy's stance breaks faster. But in the end, the right way to fight is to put constant pressure on the boss, no hesitation. Strike in every opening there is. Even if the enemy will block, your attacks will damage the stance. Of course, sometimes it is better to dodge the enemy's attack sequence than to parry it, because while the enemy is locked within its attack animation, you can attack from the back and cause damage, which will make his stance break faster. But anyway, the formula is the same. Even when you dodge and not parry, you must put constant pressure on the boss, because if you don't, the boss's stance will regen. All of that creates a very unique experience. The fights are much closer. I mean that you are constantly near the boss, unlike in other Souls games where you usually may keep your distance from the boss and approach only to strike when there's an opening. And because the fights in Sekiro are much closer, they are more risky. Because as you are constantly putting pressure on the boss also constantly puts pressure on you. But high risks equals high reward. You are basically always on edge, which creates a very cool feeling. That's why when I finally accepted this hesitation is defeat formula, I got a lot of fun playing the game. However, the game isn't perfect, so let me criticize the game a little. There are a lot of mechanics and moves that you almost don't use. And not because you don't want to, but because you can't. I'm talking about everything that consumes emblems. Basically half of the game's mechanics and features are never used or underused because of the emblem system. Basically 90% of my emblems are used in one boss fight, on Double Ape's boss. It is not that I didn't want to use them in other boss fights, or on ordinary NPCs, it is that I didn't have more. Yes, you may say that you can buy emblems, but to do that you have to grind. And who likes it? I have to grind for an hour to get like 80 or 100 emblems. That's 5 tries on a boss. I say it is not worth it. Now, I think the emblems should work like Estus, so they would regenerate after resting. That way you wouldn't be overpowered, but at the same time you could use all mechanics in the game. I think it is a good balance. What do you think? The questlines. I wanted a good ending, so I googled what I need to do. And it doesn't make sense. So, the steps to get the good endings are: Step 1. Talk to an old crazy woman. If you didn't do that up to a specific point in the plot, there's no good ending for you. Another important step to achieve the good ending is to find some notes that may be located in different places, but the most probable location is on the bottom of a small lake. But wait, most probably you won't be able to get those notes when you visit that location, because probably you won't be able to dive at that point in the game, so you will have to backtrack. But it is not like you know where those notes are. No, and since you don't know where those notes are, and you don't know that they exist, you probably won't look for them, so you probably will forget about that puddle's existence. Nevertheless, those notes contain information about the actual good ending and what we need to do, but you would be a silly goose if you think that it will be so straightforward. You think that just giving those notes to the right character and follow the instruction in those notes will be everything that is required? Of course no. If you don't ask the kid for the rice and eat it 4 times and then find the persimmon trader, you won't get a good ending. You get the idea. Basically, you just don't have the chance to actually achieve the true ending without googling. And stuff that you must do often doesn't make sense. Often in Souls games you don't even know that the questline is even an option. It actually doesn't make sense. Or for example, to get another ending for Sekiro, you have to eavesdrop on Kuro. But your ability to do it is not guaranteed. It is chance-based. When you teleport to the location where Kuro is, you have to spawn in the right place, and only then by being unnoticed by Kuro you can do it. But even then there are a lot of conditions to get the right phrase. In short, I think From Software should give gamers at least vague instructions. Otherwise, what's the point? And some may say that it is content for those people who play the game multiple times, and eventually they will get their true ending, and it will be as a reward and a new piece of content for those people. Okay, but first, there's no guarantees that the player on its own will figure it out even on his 10th playthrough. And second, that's not what people do. People just Google this shit. End of the story. So, I hope From Software will rethink their quest design and will give at least some instructions to quests. Of course, nothing too obvious, but something that will encourage you to think and in the end will give you a feeling of accomplishment. Like for example, I like the quest in Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, the quest where you help Inquisition track down heretics. There are no quest markers, you have to read and interpret the text to find what you need. It took some time, but no Google required. I didn't have to stop the game, pick up my phone, and disturb my game flow. It is just one example, but you got the idea. Now, overall, those things aside, the game is a lot of fun, and it is quite refreshing and unique. It was quite risky for From Software to make Sekiro, especially because of the formula changes and the difficulty spike compared to Dark Souls 3. So, can I recommend Sekiro? Yes, but of course not as your first Souls game. In fact, I would say that you at least have to beat Elden Ring first, because I think Sekiro is harder than Elden Ring, with the exception of Consort Rodan. I think he's the hardest boss From Software created. Now, anyway, that's it for today. If you got to this point in the video, you definitely should subscribe and leave a like. Now go and watch the From Software formula video. The video is on your screen, and if not, it will be in the comment section. See you later.